Underworld Radio. Who we got on the line?
It's your boy Neefy Cab. Back.
Ooh,
in
yeah.
action.
The new age of hip hop, pop.
You know how he do that. I already knew.
It's Underworld. And I'm here rapping it. And I ain't got no words to say, but that's what to do. It's Underworld. Underworld. Oh, style.
House lines are definitely open. 856-270-8846. We live in the building, y'all. Underworld Radio. Let's go.
Look, Lord bless me, shit, I think I need some holy water. Niggas ain't hit me in a while. Damn, he going harder. I dipped you in my world now. Show me consideration. She texts me to my phone like, boy, your dick amazing. Fuck these niggas, let them die. That's what you get for hating. Shoebox full of money, boy, I get the cake. My bitch ass big from the back, she look Jamaican. Smoking, get stoned, bomb something like a mason. I hear you talking, but can't see you, nigga. Stevie Wonder, bring the thunder. Your bitch call my phone, bring a number. Hold of a lion, I ain't lying. I'm just stating facts. I'm from a city where there's snakes and some niggas rats. Got it out the mud. I ain't had pot to piss in. Me, myself, and I, we don't want your proposition. Went to jail 30 minutes. My bitch bombed me out. Ford Nick with the cannon. I'm wildin' out. Young niggas, you are not alone. I feel your pain. I remember I was broke, jacking everything. I'm from a block where it was hot. It don't never rain. Now these niggas turn pussy. Man, ain't that a shame? Feel my pain, but you can't, cause we are not the same. Use a bitch, you're drunk driving. Stay up in your lane. I'm the shit, I'm done rhyming. I'm just giving game. Move my family on the island, I'm on some different things. 40 with the dick, call that bitch transgender. Next tattoo on my back gon' say cash getter. You trash nigga, left you in the past nigga. I'ma help your pussy ass and wrap you in this bag nigga. Shit is easy, heard the tough talk, wait where you at. I'm about to go, T-Tucker boy, get the game. Matter of fact, Christmas presents, hey, this shit's a rap. Small gun, big clip, mix it.
Idiot is attempting to reach you on your cellular device.
Coast to coast instrumentals.
I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. Y'all get trying to step on your toes. That's not how this shit goes. You get blown with the fucking fofos. You niggas better read the book, better look it up. You make a lot more if you cook it up. Keep a loyal fiend that'll hook it up. You niggas need the blueprint, then y'all should look at us. Not in disgust like we on the back of the bus. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'm trying to keep my sanity. But these young boys like to keep playing with me. I ain't the game, I'm in the game, I run the game. My name ring bells. It's old styles, all my niggas yell. And we in the place, y'all. It's Underworld all in your face, y'all. It's the pitch, catch the baseball, cause I'm home and I'm safe, y'all. Pussies, we them dickheads, come to break walls. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles.
Ripping the ones and twos with the hottest.
Brainwash, have to get my brainwash. I was brainwash, have to take my brainwash. I was brainwash, have to take my brainwash. I was brainwash. change without hope. Brainwash, no soap, unorthodox, no. I spit like a dope. Brainwash, 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 brainwash. I was so washed up, didn't wanna get up, just turned up, smoking loud, fill my urn up, got so hot, a nigga about to burn up, woke up, now a nigga trying to learn something, yo, I learned a few new lessons, not from my oppressors, make my people look small like lesson, trying to keep us under pressure, so we take these drastic measures, now we tip the scale, no we tilt the scale, fuck that, we done flip the scale of suicides, homicides, death for jail cells, trying to take us all to hell, is there heaven or hell, couldn't watch us all with TV, so they put the TV in the cell, just like they put the TV in the cells, I was brainwashed, I couldn't see myself, almost 2 decades, no shade, I created Underworld TVD by myself, did it for the love, not the wealth, tied it with the belt, nah, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to take my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, had to take my brainwash, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, you got a choice, brainwash, had to get my brainwash, brainwash, you got a chance, and I'm brainwash, what your mama didn't give you in the white man, brainwash, you got a chance, brainwash.
Sometimes you just gotta sit back, watch and listen, get a full understanding of things, you know? You didn't want me seeing brighter days, and only wanted me to lose my way. And all them jealous thoughts that you display, listen, I seen it coming from a mile away. Plotted on me, trapped me in your maze, but it was nothing for me to find my way. I was prepared for this since 20 days, nigga. I seen it coming from a mile away. Brightest day, I done read your mind, your thoughts, I saw the signs. This grimy motherfucker could've waited to catch a nigga blind. All of your intentions was to knock my hustle, pull the pistol on me, leave the scene with all my bundles. I seen it coming so vivid.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it
coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away. From a mile away.
In my soul, in my guts. Folk in your life, they don't care how they hurt you. Say you a dream, get it going to murk you. Dog eat dog, real, guessing ain't personal. Shit goes so left, ain't it reversible. Hold up, motherfuckers never wanted me to blow up. Saw it coming, they was prepping me for bad news. I was ready, preparating, played it so smooth. You had no clue, holla back cool, then I'm back cool. Looking brand new, fresh on them. Somebody heard, somebody mad, huh? Thought I didn't know I was close to a downfall. Thought I wasn't taking it home with a ground ball. How long will this go on? Faking, prolong, acting like you got love for me, acting, trying to get close to me, acting like you don't know.
I seen it coming from a mile away. 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 I seen it coming from
ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my way. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my wave. No, shorty gon' ride that dick. Yeah, I was just stunting on the gram. Yeah, let me Snapchat that shit. Whoa, niggas be hating a lot. Ounce of codeine and I stay on the block. Bag me a bitch and I stay in the cut. I pull up with that thing, see me whipping the drop. 357 replay with that Glock. Calling this jacket, she fucking or not. Notice the wave and she all on my dick, but you gotta be bad, we don't fuck with no thoughts. Riding my wave, I'm just trying to get paid. All in the club and I'm on that Douce. Got that shit lit, start hitting my wave. Got that shit lit, start hitting my wave. Whoa, shorty wanna ride my wave. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my wave. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. Up in the club, we about to get lit. Bottles on deck and we blowing that piff. Hundreds of models, see one I'ma get. I got the drip out the walk in this bitch. Whoa, I just pulled up in the Jag. Straight off the line, had to go on my bag. Chasing these checks and I'm ducking these bitches. I'm all on the jet and I'm getting that lag. Whoa, is it the flick of the wrist? No, look at this shit on my wrist. Oh, all of these diamonds, they shining, can't even see what is the time on this bitch. Whoa, I'm in the club with the strap. Looking for me, but you know where I'm at. Niggas on lean, I ain't fucking with that. I got the juice, I ain't giving it back. Whoa, shorty wanna ride my way. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride, wanna ride my way.
They don't want no beef.
Keep them screaming, what's up? Keep them screaming, what's up? Keep them screaming, what's up?
Don't want no beef.
To the world,
no beef. No beef. Oh, I bet you they run. Bet you they run.
What's up?
When it comes to that smoking, they don't want no beef. What's up? No beef. No beef. Oh, I bet you they run. Bet you they run. When it comes to that smoke,
I get it poppin' in the hood. That tough talk, save it. Keep acting like a life until you meet with David. Go ahead and let that beast come out, I be the one to tame it. These niggas talking that money, I be the one to change it. So get your frame hit, rearrange quick. These niggas just pulling out guns. Now watch me bang it. Know I can switch up my style while y'all on the same shit to shell. Shed blue scout, head and shoulders getting lit. No, you can die by the gun or the blade. Take your pick, I'm the shit. Make you disappear, that's the magic trick. Disrespect, I'm not having it. Got no respect when you dealing with these savages. Body get destroyed, knife deployed on my rabbit shit.
Oh, I bet you they run, bet you they run. When it comes to that smoke, they don't want no beef, no beef, no beef. Oh, I bet you they run, bet you they run. When it comes to that smoking, they don't want no beef, no beef, no beef. Oh, I bet you they run, bet you they run. When it comes to that smoke,
nigga, you can get it on any given Sunday. Kidnapped on a Friday, dropped off on a Monday. Body parts chopped up, spread out on the one way. My knife game sharp, but my niggas bout that gunplay. With disrespect, get shot to the chest, that'll be your last day. A hitter, go get her. So I hunt in a fast way. Never been on the block, I get money to ski mass way. Put this chrome straight to your disc and put fast play. 100 gang up in this bitch, it get nasty. Headshot will take you to the throat, it get raspy. Bitch niggas pussy, they pussy. If you ask me, bust off, I'm making it rain, that's how I blast.
They don't want no beef. Oh, I bet you they run, bet you they run. When it comes to that smoke, they don't want no beef, no beef, no beef. Oh, I bet you they run, bet you they run. When it comes to that smoke, they don't want no beef, no beef, no beef. Oh, I bet you they run, bet you they run. When it comes to that smoke, the world blows.
Underworld. The new age of hip hop, pop, pop.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. But we don't listen to the. Yeah, hey yo, 99% of these rappers be telling fibs, trying to find crap that they package to sell to kids. They never tell them to be head of a chapter, they tell them to be a rapper, like they all live happily ever after. Although it's nice how some of us getting iced out, kind of a slave riding a wave getting wiped out. The love of the money's the root of all evil, polluting their people so addictive and using is legal. They say they do it real big, unbelievable. You say you do it real big, we don't believable. INDEPENDENT, and they don't know what that means. That's why when these weak G's pretending we envy, but see I'm over that scheme. A real MC, looks like the punch your face, trying to sound all deep. Oh, sunken place, and you're full of. It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. But we don't listen to the.
Talking all that tough shit, come and get me, pal. But y'all got no nerve like a root canal. I'm loyal to a fault line, so when I shake these to the bones, best believe it's assault time. They talking about me, they clocking the watch. The kicks cost 3, I drop 2 on the socks. I watch and iPhones get hot in our zones. I don't go live, I turn up in time zones. Either she love me or she love me not. I've been known to smoke it out like a hookah shot. They say the finer things in life often come with higher price. On the way they treat a bro, might as well have gave me life. And the way I run the track, might as well have gave me likes. And my shit so fly, you might as well give me likes. Knock off the bull. You know I go hard. I go on the beats, couldn't fit in my draw.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. They all full of.
First it was then you called me a colored man. Then it was Negro, now it's Afro-American. I don't need your names, cause I got my own. I'm the original man who's been lost from home. Now for untold years, no one showed they cared. That all my black people had to live in fear, but now stop. Because your tricks don't appear to me. I'm a wiser man now because I studied my history. Going on the top, I'm still living on a hump. Don't consume white sugar, but you can get these lumps. The lame BH James, fake card playing trumps. I got a poker for a joker if you wanna play Trump. Damn cowardly devils calling me a racist zealous, cause I'm conscious of the truth without fear. And I'm telling, at least ain't dirty priests running around or killing. Got the when I see it, even without smelling it.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. They all full of.
You wanna be when you grow up. That put a target on me. I should've kept my mouth shut. To know your dreams and aspirations, get them a 1-up. To meet you at the crossroads, they playing this out from the jump. Stock market, your social, that red ink is your banking number. To cash out is to be put behind doors and taking lumber. Working for them or thrown in prison where we mistake each other as inferior. Why they hope and pray that we shank each other. The border's on our back, all we gotta do is stand up. Economic slavery put us in debt with our hands cuffed. Though I still became what I raised my hand for. It's trauma on my mental and the fight gon' be lifelong. Look into my mind, I'm traumatized. Look into my home, I'm traumatized. Look at how I move, Coming up, I always looked at family as superheroes. The blood that we shed is what helped us recoup from zero. My mother said when I pass on, stay close with your brothers. Keep it love, no sibling rivalry, trying to hurt each other. But soon out of sight, out of mind, had took its toll. I turned a blind eye to certain addictions. When it's cold, it cuts straight to the bone. In the process, you lose your soul, leaving invisible tears on a face that's growing old. To me, life as I knew it came to a standstill. I feel like a clean shirt that got thrown in the landfill. Though I still became what I raised my hand for. It's trauma on my mental and the fight gon' be lifelong. Look into my mind. Look into my home. Look at how I
Underworld Radio, who we got on the line?
And I'ma say Underworld. Underworld. Hold up. Keep the hype. It's Underworld. It's an Underworld thing coming on.
You already
gotta
know.
come up. The Underworld gonna win.
Let's get it. Let's get it. That's how we do right now, man.
Yo, I'm not an industry nigga, I'm an in the street nigga, you feel me? Like, I'm that black rose that grows from that concrete, you feel me? Like, it all started in the underworld, man.
Let's go.
Styles,
Let's
man.
go.
It's Mr. Make It Happen, better known as O3 Magic. Jimmy Hoffa _103rd on Instagram, you feel me? Come fuck with your boy. Go holla at New Jersey number 1 hip hop, man. Especially if y'all from New Jersey. The platform is there for y'all. You know what I'm saying?
That's how the definitely open. 856-270-8846. We live in the building, y'all. Underworld Radio. Let's go.
Rather die for what's right than live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast. Woo, hey yo, it's spiritual warfare, and I ain't scared, cause I'm prepared to leave a sucker impaired. Yeah. Chief Birdsong and Thundermaker. Let's get it. Underworld. Yo, I make mistakes and then I fix them. Approach with caution, I will fight off your issues. I may cause tears, but I don't provide tissue. If you come at self-liquidating, self will dismiss you. No bullets, blades and vernacular missiles. Catch as I toss blows, did it shift your bone bristle? You must equate rock to challenge my stature. I'm really down for the cause and I don't click with actors. No perfection, but I'm chasing it. My past, I cherish my life, so I'm changing it. No more girl problems.
Going heavy in the underworld right now, man. Let's get it. Underworld.
Yeah, I'm about this paper in the brain between your tapers. Not interested in your envy, I'm the downfall of you haters. So fall back and get your soul crizat. Lyrically, I'm a hurting for suckers that rock curtains. Fugazis. Yeah. I'd rather die for what's right than live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast, sucker. Woo.
Going in the underworld. Talk to him, Bob. Shouts to Fresh Flow ENT. The squad Underworld Radio is in the building.
not my passion. Sitting pretty, money is the motive. I'm focused. Don't hang with too many cause they bogus. Quick to cut them off. G Nicole, I'm the coldest. Turned into a boss, now I'm back potato loaded. My pockets got my Billie Jeans long and my money steady stacking. You lacking? Okay, I got action. And it's Gabrielle Nicole, so please don't call me Gabby. Mirror, mirror on the wall, now tell me who the baddest. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of Jacksons. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action. Action, action, flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of Jacksons. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action. Action, action, flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. If I see a duck, he get plucked, closed caption. My account fantastic. One check did a somersault, the other did a backflip. My money dramatic. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I be laughing. I just want the money, some more money, and the fashion. If your man don't got no cash, then he ain't up for grabbing. Gucci's in my pocket, no wrench, but I be dressing though. Baddest in the city, you know, and I'm the next to blow. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of Jacksons. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action. Action, action, flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of Jacksons. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action. Action, action, flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him.
Wouldn't have it any other way. I'm from the streets of NJ. I'm blessed to see another day. And I didn't never care what another had to say. I come a long, long way. I'm blessed to see another day. All you haters better move, better get out the way. On my knees I pray night and day. See another day. Since birth, was blessed to see this day. Some say it could've went the other way. That's what my mother say. Them damn demons try to take my son away. Since my very first day, not in God's plan. I stand grown ass man, but okay. Anyway, any day you can get blown away in the streets of NJ. R.I.P. the Nene, another victim of the gunplay. Gun down on a Sunday with the AK, right where a son play. Man, maybe he will understand one day. It's a cycle. Gangsters want that title like that nigga Michael. Crashed his motorcycle right into a light pole. Where his head go? Don't nobody know for sure. We didn't die slow like that hobo that he got slow for calling Popo. Seen him doing the jukes on the solo. Now we headless, dead as a hobo. Karma flow, you never let the guns blow. You get a harder blow with sip for tat, gap for gap, rat-a-tat-tat. Just a J bro on the track. We putting Jersey back on the map. Bang. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm from the streets of NJ. I'm blessed to see another day. And I didn't never care what another had to say. I come a long, long way. I'm blessed to see another day. All you haters better move, better get out the way. On my knees I pray night and day. See another day. Cause they dying fast out here. Kicking out of town is out here. Out of here. Cause they don't know what it's about. Out here. Dirty Jersey, dirty, dirty. Niggas on the curb, me. Hustling weed with no seeds. Rocking long white tees and dirty Jersey. Shouts to my niggas in the 30. That nigga James Worthy. My man did his thing for his gang and served 30. Big Shirley, she got some payback for her baby daughter Percy. Show that better fight, no mercy. Laughed as he screamed out, don't hurt me. R.I.P. to that nigga they rest in his grave. Met a chick, got laid, overdose at a rave. Then the rave got sprayed. This NJ full of babies, AKs, goons in the hallway, raw, yeah, all day. Get it served anyway, you get served anyway, cause these niggas don't play. Feel me, real late, going hard. R.I.P. to my cousin, move hard. Hit the block, move that rock so hard. Jersey, home of stolen cars. Bang. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm from the streets of NJ. I'm blessed to see another day. And I didn't never care what another had to say. I come a long, long way. I'm blessed to see another day. All you haters better move, better get out the way. On my knees I pray night and day, see another day. I was born in the borough, bread in the bricks, blessed to be in this bitch. Old styles is the shit. I was on Prince when Prince was the street. Shouts to 18, full of clapper. Shouts to Astor, got my money. Ghosts like Casper, Avon, Lion Jr., Chancellor. Word to Paradise Dancers. R.I.P. the Panther, gorgeous dancer. Strangled in the whip by a trick she thought was handsome. Beat, rape, handsome. And one left her naked abandoned. So much evil I can never understand none. Just blessed to be alive. Many nights I could have died. Drive by, shells fly. ATF, FBI, stick the kids on the ride. New Jersey Drive, so live. R.I.P. to free they dollars, always on my mind. Part of why I'm so blessed to be alive. Who next to die with bullets fly? Same shit, Jersey back to NY. As we mourn and cry, those who had to die gotta feel blessed to be alive.
All this cash tricking off on me. Hella trips, hella tags, hella bags, hella sprees. Niggas spank, got me bent, need every dollar, every cent. If you want me to be his bitch, I need trips, I need whips, I need whips, fast shit. Talking about the Hellcat, had his money but it's spent. Be ballin', he want it back. I suck dick, that 2 year shit. 1 second quit. I do not spit. Sugar daddy want some sugar. You bet I go down under. Belly button need some boogers. A sponsor you will never see. No deciding, I need everything. Everything. Diamond rings, shiny earrings. Everything. Niggas spend all his cash tricking off on me. Hella trips, hella tags, hella bags, hella sprees. Niggas spent, got me bent, need every dollar, every cent. If you want me to be his bitch, I need trips, I need whips. Niggas spend all his cash tricking off on me. Hella trips, hella tags, hella bags, hella sprees. Niggas spent, got me bent, need every dollar, every cent. If you want me to be his bitch, I need trips, I need whips. I need Papi Diamond Peso, Dammy 91 Rich, Papi Diamond Beso. Then he give me kiss right on his lips, digging his hip, give me very big tip. If the pieces hit, Magna fit me, might just sit up on his dick. After we gon' go to fifth, swipe the shit. I need this, I need that, Birkin bag, strips to sacks, boss niggas where it's at. Fuck it up and get it back, that's a fact. I got racks in the back of the box. Niggas spend all his cash tricking off on me. Hella trips, hella tags, hella bags, hella sprees. Niggas spent, got me bent, need every dollar, every cent. If you want me to be his bitch, I need trips, I need whips. Niggas spend all his cash tricking off on me. Hella trips, hella tags, hella bags, hella sprees. Niggas spent, got me bent, need every dollar, every cent. If you want me to be his bitch, I need trips, I need whips. Benz and Beamer whip, bad little bit. Kiss him on the zip for some truck fits. I wear red, skirt with the zip, outfits drip. Thanks my trick, bitch I'm rich, I live lavish. Niggas spend all his cash tricking off on me. Hella trips, hella tags, hella bags, hella sprees. Niggas spent, got me bent, need every dollar, every cent. If you want me to be his bitch, I need trips, I need whips.
Back, all these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, basically going with the pack, started birth when I know how to flip. Ken bro, yeah I grew with a brick, double up with the flick of the wrist. Took a block just to pistol this shit, all day wasn't taking no shifts. Trap phone, yeah I'm making a click, clap hard till a nigga get rich. Ball mains, these ain't Levi's, these designer jeans, yeah a nigga got drip. Big gun like tree size, it's a long pole, won't fit on the hip. See it hop and I'm letting it rip. Ghost mode after I do a hit. Smoking dope and it's making me sick. I'm just trying to get as high as I can. I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait,
I really was born on the block. Asked mama, think she lost me at 12. I was on my way to junior high, never made it there cause I got quarter with shells. Big brother had to side with it and I was seeing shit that he caught in the mail. Mama used to tell me, nigga, fuck motherfucker, you could do what you want, but you walk in a jail. 16, I had a thing with the V's. Used to park all 3 in a piece. Used to have young knees in the trees. Whistle niggas soon as you see the D's. All I wanted was a coupe then. Every day sight new trends. You would never see the eyes glow, cause a couple hundred on a new lane.
I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait,
I used to trap at the trap, never seen you and your man as a rat. Wait, we really post across tracks, style boy and he's still on the map. Wait, if I call guns it's a rap, head tap, ain't no bringing them back. Trap talk, got a dish off the pack, running here and I'm letting it blast. Act up and we letting all straps, dope strong, smell the shit through the bag. A lot of money, I'm just touching the cash. Beams on and no laser tag. Wait, yeah, I'm just chasing the bag. Every show, I'm showing my ass. Style boy, and I get to it fast. Style boy, and I get to it fast. Wait,
I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait,
I'm outside right now. I'm actually on the block, on my ass, about to spit a freestyle. I'm out here. This shit crazy how you can do this shit. If I had this shit back in the day when I was on my time, this shit be crazy, man.
Underworld ENT coming to you.
I'm out here. Another time I'm out here. Gotta drop another rhyme, I'm out here. Yo, it's about the nick of time, I'm out here. Your niggas down and out there, I'm out here. Your niggas know I'm back in the place, y'all. Your niggas about to catch it to your face, y'all. Your niggas getting hit with the face, y'all. Your niggas got the fifth, well I'm out here. You wanna come and get, well I'm out here. Old styles and you know this niggas out here.
Yo man, we tuning in. Underwater Official, Underwater Radio Station, Underwater Movement. It's Underworld everything. Yeah!
I'm out here. I'm out here. Underworld Television and Underworld Radio. I'm out here. I'm out here. Your niggas talking heavy shit, I'm out here. Your niggas really wanna get them out here. You really talking real shit, I'm out here. Got the motherfucking gat.
A dope beat and a dope bitch. For sure, a dope house and a dope whip. I got it from the kitchen with the chicken flip. It's done like every time when I leak the spit. You run from 16s like it's the big fifth. No doubt, cause that's the sugar that you dealing with. Arm, leg, arm, head, right here 100%. Stand on it, build on it, drop on it every inch. Before it starts, collect the bag, don't it make sense? If not, it don't add up, then I'm excellent. Pay me for mine's professional excellence. High grade to the levels you never seen this shit. Invisible sets and Corvettes, I ain't get it yet. When the time come, you can have it, I'm about to check. Made this great, ain't cost me much but a pawn. The bomb threat with Semtex and napalm. Nigga, music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need.
What's good, G? Old Styles, what up, brother? Yo, shouts out to, you know what I'm saying, Underworld, UTV Raps, you know what I'm saying, my nigga Old Styles, you know what I'm saying, respect, Scatter RP, you know what I'm saying, when I'm watching and listening, that's what I'm listening to, Underworld, UTV Raps, you know what I'm saying, salute.
Beats by Meta, man. Quest lines are definitely open, 856-270-8846. We live in the building, your Underworld Radio rotation on our show, UTV Raps, Underworld Radio, all promotion going through from the Underworld television scene, Underworld movement. It's your boy DJ JFK. We about to get into these priority artists. Much love and respect to all the priority artists that's on the CD and on the next one and the next one. You know how we do. We gonna keep it going. Let's get into this CD, man. Priority artists. Let's go.
A dope beat and a dope bitch. For sure, a dope house and a dope whip. I got it from the kitchen with the chicken flip.
It's done like every time when I leak the spit. You run from 16s like it's the big fifth. No doubt, cause that's the sugar that you dealing with. Arm, leg, arm, head, right here 100%. Stand on it, build on it, drop on it every inch. Before it starts, collect the bag, don't it make sense? If not, it don't add up, then I'm excellent. Pay me for mine's professional excellence. High grade to the levels you never seen this shit. Invisible sets and Corvettes, I ain't get it yet. When the time come, you can have it, I'm about to check. Made this great, ain't cost me much but a pawn. A bomb threat with Semtex and napalm. Nigga, music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. A notebook and some quiet time. No doubt, a loud pack and some tracks to find. My bag, I'm all in it, you can feel the lines. It's words when I spill it, it's my lifetime. You dudes pay a lot for the light slime. Myself, I'm in the back with a real grind. Like fuck it, you's a savage and you love swine. Scattered tats the veggies so you running high. Behind your mumble rap, auto-tune rhymes. It's love, do your thing, I'ma grab mines. For sure, 25-8 as I climb. Some hate is all facts, dumb, deaf and blind. I'm humble when I network intertwine. I travel, move state to state through them lines. For lawyers to see the kid, they hold the scat sign. It's Digi, a bomb threat, Semtex and napalm. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. A big loft, sit back, recline. Okay, I do my thing, you damn right it's mine. I come from a spot, you gotta blow the grind. Stay low, out the way before the page is fine. It's that simple, the way of crime. Reality rap now since the past time. Under the sun, there's nothing new to life ride. Fuck out of here, family first is how we rise. Without music, I'm throwed off of real lies. It's like I need my meds from the doc prescribed. Samples and loops, boom, bad biz my high. Hold up, you do you, I'm at the finish line. I'm focused up, out of sight, out of mind. Get into it, the agriculture diamond shine. New project, release be the 5th time. Hey yo, a bomb threat, Semtex and napalm. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine.
We dying so sweet. We just need a miracle. Barrels crying, chips dying. We just need a miracle. Governor line, spot, got to free a miracle. For the bomb, drops, bad, pray for whatever. Gold people dying so sweet. We just need a miracle. Barrels crying, chips dying. We just need a miracle. Government line, spot, got to free a miracle. For the bomb, drops, bad, pray for whatever. I know what I know. This political flow, not for sure. My land is not full. It's been going on for murder, poverty, and war. In the smoke store, they selling guns at the corner store. Dudes selling more crack in the jaw. Chicks turning tricks in the back of my car. Now this chicks, kids sucking dicks cause of what they saw. This is cycle breaking law. For the come up, everybody trying to come up for the last day. Come up, hustle to the sun. We just need a miracle. Barrels crying, chips dying. We just need a miracle. Government line, spot, got to free a miracle. For the bomb, drops, bad, pray for whatever. Gold people dying so sweet. We just need a miracle. Barrels crying, chips dying. We just need a miracle. Government line, spot, got to free a miracle. For the bomb, drops, bad, pray for whatever. Nothing changed when Obama came. Everything's still the same. If you play the game, you get banged. Politicians get hanged. Suit and tie gang, they run everything. Hate the street slang thing, threatening. And they betting with the lies of the children and your wise bees in the hive. Once you clean the die, so there's no more. You and I no more. You and I see why I see with my third eye. We will never know why a soldier died.
We just need a miracle.
Girl, I'm trying to shut down.
We just need a miracle.
Governor the line, fire,
we just need a miracle. Let the wave over them go.
People die, so to sleep.
We just need a miracle.
Fans trying to shut down.
We just need a miracle.
Governor the line, fire,
we just need a miracle. Let the wave over them go. Swear. Vigilant, cause the violent time is prey on the innocent. Real shit, people crying, soldiers dying, and these politicians lying about a child lying on the ground silent. I am on the ramp, this the first seed that I plant with the underworld stamp. I am Mr. Boot Camp with my troops at.
We live in the building, Underworld Radio. Who we got on the line?
Boy, it's your boy Lodge Rule, man. Fuck with the homies, man.
Yeah.
Just the game, man. I'll just put my heart on it real quick. Look. There.
Live in the building, Underworld shit, man.
All I ask is what do you want in this motherfucking world, girl? Yeah. I'ma grind, I'ma give it to you. You just gotta take my word, girl. Yeah. If you want me to leave, let me know. You just gotta say the word, girl. Say the word, let me know. I don't want to, but you push me away. I'm a G, I'm a swerve, girl. Yeah. Look, I'm flipping pages, I can't think straight. Hey. Got me hustling, talking to you in the same day. Yeah, it's on you, let the games play. Hey, promise to keep it real and stay the same way. Damn, but you know I ball like Jordan. Trap jump just like it's Spartan. You know the moves be calling on my phone, leave me alone. You know I ball like Jordan. Trap jump just like it's Spartan. You know them hoes be calling on my phone, leave me alone. Top so down, but life goes on. Just gotta keep it like that. Look, all I ask is what do you want in this motherfucking world, girl? Yeah. I'ma grind, I'ma give it to you. You just gotta take my word, girl. Yeah. If you want me to leave, let me know. You just gotta say the word, girl. Say the word, let me know. I don't want to, but you push me away. I'm a G, I'm a swerve, girl. Yeah.
Shouts to my homie Lodge Rule, man. Definitely turning up for us with a freestyle on the line. Shouts to you, brother. Let's go.
You say something better mean that. Before you sign, need to read that. Niggas sliding for a feedback. Only apologetic when the dice crap. Can't take life back. My young nigga got a shit bag. Still with the shit black. Drill with the big bag. Zombie tips knock off your gut like a six pack. Hold up, I'ma catch them all. Throw them like a Pokeball. Aim this blow at your body, knock a shoulder off. Mr. Baking soda soft. Hit the bank, blow it off. Flipping all these babies. Chopping roosters like a Foster farm. Yeah. Flash the Ruger like a Costco card. Yeah. I trap with shooters till the shot clock off, yeah. I'm Ferris Bueller when the cops get called. Wait, I'd probably wake up on a yacht tomorrow for real. Just chill, focus on the meals. Is you the type to jeopardize a hoe for the thrill? Never make a wife out of hoe in the field. Long nights with the dope on the scale. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. The ice on my grill. I know how it feel. To ride with that drill. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. How it feel to be real. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know. Trouble, it pass, it comes and go. I split that gas, that Texaco. My plug get packed from Salvador. I know what to do next, yeah. Flipping money like a suplex. Bullets tag your whole crew, call it group sex. I know how to send it. She know I ain't scripted. She know for a fact I'm the realest she had been with. I don't know these bitches, but I know what their intent is. I know if I let her give me top, I'm gon' resent it. Calvin Klein draws crotch cover with her lipstick. Man, I'm tired of bro codes. Sick of y'all, that's a throw code. Now watch me ball on a GoPro. Wait, I be in LA where you don't go. Yeah, I still pull up on you, bolo. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. The ice on my grill. I know how it feel to ride with that drill. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. How it feel to be real. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know. I know. I I know. Trouble, it pass, it comes and go. I spit that gas, that Texaco. My plug get packed from South, but I know how it feel. I know how it feel. The ice on my grill, I know how it feel. To ride with that drill, I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. How it feel to be real. I know how it feel. I know how it feel. I know how.
That little bitch, y'all don't know it, but she mine. Shawty A1, swear to God, I ain't lying. And you ain't never had a real one, caught the dime. Damn, little mama, why you do this all the time? They hating on the kid, well, they running out of time. I'm creepy up, but you know I'm bullying with my slime. My other bitch hit me, baby, I ain't got the time. Working overtime, time to stay up on my grind. And shawty, she gon' make that ass clap for them dollars. Take it up, then bring it home to Papa. Girl, you slim, thick, look something like a model. We VIP waiter, yeah, I need another bottle. Everywhere we go, the bitches gon' follow. Smacking $100 bill off a stripper bottle. Yeah, order more gold bottle. I ain't never ever claimed to be a role model.
Oh, baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. bad little bitch. Shooting, lying in a shooting star. Bad bitch, and I noticed that you are. Okay. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bad little bitch. Oh, baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Back that ass up real quick. Stupid, thick, and by far. Make that ass clap, booty cheeks going hard. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bring that ass here real quick. Spitting, and I'm staying with my squad. She say she wanna get it, she gon' ride. Doing splits off the post, splits off the dick. Oh baby, that's what you get. Oh baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bad little bitch. Shooting, lying in a shooting star. Bad bitch, and I noticed that you are. You a bad little bitch.
Watch you.
What's that on that beat? Oh.
I like how you move with them jeans on. That ass is type huge with them jeans on. I'm like, what it do with them jeans on? Look right with them jeans on. I'm trying to get them jeans off. I like how you move with them jeans on. That ass is type huge with them jeans on. I'm like, what it do with them jeans on? Right with them jeans on. I'm trying to get them jeans off. Work something for a nigga. Work. Twerk something for a nigga, twerk something for a nigga, twerk something for a nigga, twerk something for a nigga. I'm back in this bitch. Old styles MOB, that's money over bitches. Still love it when them chicks working on the hits, left to right all night. You could twerk up on this hit, break gooses, all that I sip. Getting cash always on point, cause these thugs trying to trip in the club on some gangsta shit. I call it hater shit. I'm trying to see these chicks working like they put in work for this grip. Looking right with them jeans on. Oh, Molly Duck, smelling good, getting your lean on. Looking like an angel if I ever seen one. Say the word, baby girl, we gone. Do some things you never seen done. We could chill the whole week gone. Have your speed gun. Tongues like a D gun. I can have you leaking, that's just literally speed gun. Come on. I like how you move with them jeans on. That ass is type huge with them jeans on. I'm like, what it do with them jeans on? Look right with them jeans on. I'm trying to get them jeans off. I like how you move with them jeans on. That ass is type huge with them jeans on. I'm like, what it do with them jeans on? Right with them jeans on. I'm trying to get them jeans off. Twerk something for a nigga. Twerk something for a nigga. Twerk something for a nigga. Twerk something for a nigga, twerk. I like how you move with them jeans on. That ass is type huge with them jeans on. I'm like, what it do with them jeans on? Look right with them jeans on. I'm trying to get them jeans off. I like how you move with them jeans on. That ass is type huge with them jeans on. I'm like, what jeans on, right with them jeans on, trying to get them jeans on. Twerk something for a nigga. Twerk, 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 twerk something for a nigga. Twerk, 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 twerk something for a nigga. Twerk, 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 twerk something for a nigga. Twerk, 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 twerk something for a nigga.
What's up, Queen B? How you been? Much love.
Oh, Styles, yeah, special love to you too. Queen Bean, and I mean that. Call you a king bean for whatever struggle you have been through. You a king for that. You made it. You made it to tell your story, to pass that message, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I know it, bro.
It's true. Okay, believe that. It's true. It's not a game. It's not a game. When you do all your bullshit, keep your ass at home like me. So when you get fucked up, you fall asleep in your bed and wake up like a nigga.
You be tripping.
Your ass better be home too. You heard what I said. You heard what I said. Everybody play. You better be at home. So peace out.
Shouts to my girl Queen B for tuning into the show. Much love to you, Underworld Radio, with your girl Sticky O Styles. Beats by my homie Meta. Request lines is definitely open, y'all. Let's go.
Pasta and I got all the sauce. Y'all are butter in your pasta. You're never gonna blow up. Your flow made me throw up. And when you bout to drop, everybody be like, so what? You ain't got no buzz. And every time you show up, it's like the fucking audience that fell into a coma. They never gonna know you, not even your promoter. And he the one you pay to put you out there and promote you. We the ones who got the fucking culture and the commotion ready to
What? Did you just say my name? Oh, okay, I had enough of this, man. Dang, bro. Look, what was that for? I thought we were supposed to be cool. Drop it on Valentine's Day? Where's the love at, man? I mean, that was cute and all, but I mean, who put you up to this, Jay? Oh, we could have worked together if you got an album out you're trying to promote, man. That's wacky, man. Now I gotta roast you, man. It's crazy.
Gotta put him back in his lane. Gotta put respect on his name.
Salute that.
I don't know who should get blamed, but why you let the man got you up to get fame? Gotta put him back in his lane. Gotta put respect on his name.
Salute that.
I don't know who should get blamed, but why you let the man got you up to get fame?
Yeah, Holmes, good look for when you played my song. If fake beef was the plan, I think you played it wrong. You could've told me in advance, I would've played along. But y'all playing games, now you won't play for long. But we could play it up, look how you played yourself. You let your man play you out, trying to find God. Could've taken a safer route, dumping out homes like it's my paper route. Now you nothing but garbage I'm taking out.
I just lay low, don't need stress. I exterminate these pests. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I be less? I just lay low, don't need stress. I exterminate these pests. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I be less?
All these life lessons expressing little confessions. Dispel a legion of warring angels and ill connection. Praying he needs Jesus' protection. Lord, please forgive these praying hands. You're about to catch them like the Holy Ghost, slaying hands, slain in the spirit, and about to stretch them like Smith and Wesson. How you say you a blessing when you don't even know the Lord? Row in the same boat, you went overboard. Let's song over? I'm bored. I hold the sword from a colder war over your head. This swinging right at your neck to slit the vocal cord. You bucking out. This is a misstep when it comes to cloud. Rainmaker flow, don't stop. Just keep flooding out. Here we go. Fear the flow. Playing stereo. What you trying to do on radio now? I did years ago. Come for me, you must be under spell. Suicide's up in Connecticut. Guess that's why you're like, what the hell?
Gotta put him back in his lane. Better put respect on his name.
Salute that.
I don't know who should get blamed, but why you let the man got you up to get flamed?
If you asked, I could've showed you how you supposed to host a show. When girl, you listen, it's now a school you and scold you and hold your hand at the floor just to wake you for saying nobody knows me. But you're the nobody that knows me cause of that promoter. Yet you know the only reason that I know you, that promoter chose you as the bait to take your body and soul. Like you need a baker or smoker, you animal, I'm a poacher. Salam alaikum, you salami bacon, I'm roaster. Vulture, before you consume the culture, I tip the cup coaster. Boot you out the game, you'll never come closer. That promoter told me to expose you as opposed to nobody been buying what you selling. Call me, I'm a close. You don't wanna start this, but I spark and park this. Murder you verbally, then defecating your carcass. Incredible, that was terrible. I'm hysterical. Better go back to your day job doing clerical, making schedules. Out of every 5, I'm a star. You just general. Salute the new commander-in-chief. Offense federal. Hire me to rewrite your verse. It was illegible. Blessed are the meek. I delete and condemn the pedestal.
I just lay low, don't need stress. I experiment in these best. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I be less?
Salute that.
I just lay low, don't need stress. I experiment in these best. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I be?
Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Trying to disrespect me. Haters come to get me. Who gon' check me? 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 Trying to disrespect me. Haters come and get me. Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? When a nigga burn up like it's a hold up, hold up. I know what make a nigga rolled up like fruit roll up. Sleep your face rolled up, make you get that gold up. I thought I told ya, my squad full of soldiers. He hold us, my controllers, my bars break boulders. I used to be sky high till I went solar, pushing white like polar. Bunch of high rollers, who the fuck gon' check me? Used to be commuter love, too many commuter thugs, drive by strollers, talk shit till I catch you walking with your stroller. Put it on everything under the sun, smack it in front of your son like you my son for talking vulgar. I will catch you like I told ya. I let a lot slide since I got older. OG, think you bolder, get more colder than a shoulder. I get Nova. Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Trying to disrespect me. Haters come and get me. Who gon' check me? 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 Trying to disrespect me. Haters come and get me. Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Freeze.
Sober, yeah. I'm barely ever sober, yeah. I swear I'm never sober, yeah. I'm hardly ever sober. Another hand with the best friend. Nasty with the pen. Tripping after 10. We got what you need, no. What you need, figured out what you need, no. What you need, I got what you need, no. What you need, gotta fix for all your needs, no. All your needs, yeah. Feel like I'm the motherfucking man. Damn, feel like I just caught another win. Damn. Came back and I'm here with this. Bitches throwing pussy like this shit again. This finna get ugly like a blind date. Yeah, my pocket's fat like a blind date. Y'all late, new to this shit, but I move like an old head. Call old girl so she can give me more head. Oh man, don't make a scene. Been shitting on these niggas so my bathroom's clean. I do not know her, Billie Jean. She came up short like a breeze. Jeans, these lames all trash, the breeze. Jeez, I made them all mad, now they feeling steam. I feel like it's permanent. I feel like I'm moving in. I feel like they're missing it. I feel like you can now make a difference. I feel like I am the man with the meanest shit. man with the meanest chef. Yeah, barely ever sober. Yeah, I'm rarely ever sober. Yeah, I swear I'm never sober. Yeah, I'm hardly ever sober. Open up my hand with the best friend. Nasty with the pen. Tripping after 10. We got what you need, no. What you need, figured out what you need, no. What you need, I got what you need, no. What you need, gotta fix for all your needs, no. All your needs, yeah. No time for that R&R. Making all these moves, put my car in start. Flames in the booth like I'm Charizard. Had a setback like a really bad glitch. They're trying to work it out, so I'm sore as shit. See you going down, it's the wrong way, nigga. Told your girl, come my way, nigga. She in good hands like Allstate, nigga. Always go hard, never hesitate. Bad bitches all gravitate. Know you seen better days. Swear you seen better days, but they all amazed in the maze. Trying to figure out what's in the mate and the maze. To your left, now look to your right. Something ain't right. Ooh. When you claim you the best, you better wear a vest, cause soon they'll see it's true. Ooh. Feel like I conquered it. Feel like they can't get in. Feel like I'm in it, man. Feel like I made it, man. I feel like you can now make a difference. I feel like I am the man with the meanest chef. Man with the meanest chef. Yeah, barely ever sober. Yeah, I'm rarely ever sober. Yeah, I swear I'm never sober. Yeah, I'm hardly ever sober. Open up my hand with the best friend. Nasty with the pen. Tripping after 10. We got what you need, no. What you need, figured out what you need, no. What you need, I got what you need, no. What you need, gotta fix for all your needs, no. All your needs, yeah.
Now tuned into Underworld Radio with Old Styles and the Underworld team. We playing a lot of indie artists tonight. We going in, we're gonna have request lines open in a minute. Make sure y'all call in. We going in heavy right now. Let's go.
This one, I see you feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I know you're feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I see you feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I know you're feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I see you feeling me. Gotta feel this one. Back on the motherfucking avenue, tryna move this glue. Gotta feel me, cause you know I feel you. You said you wanted to, I got 4, 4, 2, 5. We'll be so live. I'm getting niggas hot. Drive-bys on my block. Niggas don't stop. Cocking Glocks, busting shots at them crooked ass cops. But I'm chillin'. I'm trying to stack my millions up with the shit. Right on the fucking mic, I rap all night. But I know you're feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I hear you feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I see you feeling me. Gotta feel this one. I know you're feeling me. Gotta feel this one too. And you know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stay on this block trying to do what it do. Cause my crew, my fam, my beats, we gotta eat in these dirty, dirty streets. Nobody can compete with me. You need to speak your beat on these concrete streets. You niggas don't wanna fuck with Keith the lead star. Leave a nigga scar on they boulevard. When I kick a freestyle, it goes hard. You're feeling me, gotta feel this one. I see you feeling me, gotta feel this one. I know you're feeling me, gotta feel this one. I hear you feeling me, gotta feel this one too. My shit is so live. I got my bees in the fucking beehive, and we bout to ride, nigga, bout to die.
Nigga made a homicide, and you don't know why nobody tell me shit. Yo, not a felon kid, misdemeanor, but I seen the things in the streets that niggas try to do just to eat. Niggas getting popped up, locked up, shot up. Man, I don't give a fuck. I'ma get these fucking stacks up. 1, 2, you're feeling weak, feel this one. I hear you feeling weak, gotta feel this one too. I know you're feeling weak, gotta feel this one. Feeling weak, gotta feel this one too. Feeling weak, gotta feel this one. Feeling weak, gotta feel this one too. Gotta feel this one too. Freestyle, one take shot. I don't write shit on his ass, man. I just rap. You come out like that. You know what I'm saying? Go. Underworld.com. Old Styles, JK.
To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I love her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. 80 racks for her, paid straight cash for her. Another 20 on the details, you add it up. She high maintenance, so I pamper her. Every few months, 1,000 just to tune her up. All hard junior way, I maneuver her. Baby girl automatic, but she's so clutch. Millionaire touch, I wash her up twice a day. Every time I show my face, she be in the way. Out making moves, posting through the avenues. Might grab me some blunts when I get a food. At the head stretch, fly like my Sunday best. We campaigning, all my running mates. Since they busted gates, I've been busting plays. We stay running in and out of NJ. Garden State, we hit the parkway on a date. I keep her on the move, she act up, I pump her brakes. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I love her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I love her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. 20-inch screen, when I'm in reverse. Interior so sick, Lord need a nurse. Leather on the seat, leather on the floor. Wood grain of dub, leather all across the board. Remote control make it hard to feel like I'm driving. Push 200, feel like I'm flying. Skin is built in, so they undetected. I tap the steering wheel and send my cop friend a message. Life is beautiful, damn right, so is she. She got me in my feelings, thinking we was meant to be. Popped the cherry when I peeled the plastic from inside her. First time I laid my eyes on her, had to buy her. No negotiations, plus I left a tip. Had to show the dealer who we doing business with. Now it's back massages every time we in park. And wifey hate her guts because she stole my heart. I snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I love her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody jacking us. Snatched her from the dealership, I fell in love with her. I love her look when I pull up to the club with her. To the hood with her, out the garage with her. I got them looking like they never.
I don't got a right. Don't jock my left, watch my right. Check my rap. I do this all night. Check my rap sheet. It runs long as a track meet. When me and the track meet, it's like beef on the beat. Check my rap sheet. I don't got a right. Don't jock my left, watch my right. Check my rap. I do this all night. Check my rap sheet. It runs long as a track meet. When me and the track meet, it's like beef on the beat. Check my rap sheet. rap shit. I can spit some trap shit. Got me stuck like a magnet. How my youngins stay fly as the maggots. You faggots like addicts. Running into oncoming traffic. Acting like you want static. Shit could get tragic. Right now I'm just rapping. A lot of realness about to happen. You talking about scrapping. I'm about that action. Gat clapping. Walking through your hood like this shit had never happened. Check my rap sheet. 10 toes down in the concrete. And I never miss a beat. Let me rephrase that. I never been beat. Ride the beat to the beat. You could never compete. If your flow weak, I can spit bars all week. I barely tweet. Battle beef I eat. You pussy so sweet. Catch me in the streets trying to make a meal like me. My bars stay on fleek. Check my rap sheet. I don't gotta write. Don't jock my left, watch my right. Check my rap sheet. I do this all night. Check my rap sheet. It runs long as a track beat. With me in the track meet, it's like beef on a beat. Check my rap sheet. I don't gotta write. Don't jock my left, watch my right. Check my rap sheet. I could do this all night. Check my rap sheet. It runs long as a track meet. With me in the track meet, it's like beef on a beat.
With all this competition around, man, I got issues. I find it hard to hold it down, man, I got issues. But when your family's not around, man, I got issues. To overcome this, stand your ground, man, I got issues.
Grandma,
man, I got
Pops,
issues.
this for y'all.
Man, I got issues.
Told you I was going up, straight to the top. Let's go. Mark of a king, I was told I was destined to rise. I told my pops don't go, I seen death in his eyes. Bigger problems, bigger issues make it hard to decide. You let it build until it fill or you erupt inside. Either the problems get bigger or you drink and you drive. 6 shots to spin the barrel, guess I'm wanting to die. The burden on my back is bigger than what I'm feeling inside. Won't tell myself the truth, so I'm believing the lie.
Man, I got issues. With all this competition around, man, I got issues. I find it hard to hold it down, man, I got issues. When your family's not around, man, I got issues. To overcome this, stand your ground, man, I got issues. Man, I got issues. Man, I got issues. Man, I got issues.
Love.
Man, I got issues. Man, I got issues.
Left for dead to put thoughts in your head. Could have been weak. I watch the streets and make competition instead. Knowledge I never lack when you constantly fed. Snakes always get caught cause they constantly shed. The real nigga not gon' bitch if he making his bed. The real nigga not gon' snitch if he know what he did. Weak niggas is small talk. A man live how we live. Raised by grandmas and pops, so it's hard for the kid. Turn boys to men, now I see what you did. And since both of you gone, I'ma have to finish the trend. I gotta stay strong, even though I'm dying within. Pause, I can't pause with so much on the fence. I gave my word to big stage. Pop, let's make this dent. The time we now losing is gone. That's the time I'm missing we spent. I'm sick, I feel like I hit with a brick. And since I can't say it to you, this my time to vent. No more jail, no more pain. New life is what you gain. The legend deserted fame. The world you bought changed. The reason is for my name. This leather is straight to heaven and it's already sent.
Man, I got issues. With all this competition around, man, I got issues. I find it hard to hold it down, man, I got issues. When your family's not around, man, I got issues. To overcome this, stand your ground, man, I got issues. Man, I got issues. Man, I got issues.
Yo, this your boy Wafu Malik Star. I'm chilling in the underworld with your boy O Stiggity, O Styles. You know what I'm saying? Where the heat comes from. Y'all need to get up on this. Y'all need to be down with the underworld team. Join the movement. Let's go.
Get 'em! This your boy Mac ripping 304 Dub V, baby. Get 'em squad, GS all day. And when I want to listen to real hip hop, I tune into Underworld Radio and hang out with my boy Old Styles, the JFK and Jers, and all my Law fans. Get 'em!
Yeah, we're good, man. It's D.R. Reader, Realist MC, CEO of the Real Entertainment. Shout out to my man, Original Styles, the Underground Fire, nigga. Holding it down for Underworld and Underground ENT.
Yo, it's your dude Crisis. Giving much love, much respect, and much love to my bro, the pioneer. Beginning and where it's ending.
Body bags everywhere, the hood is in the drought. Tryna see you get in there so we can take them niggas out. Bricks in the book bag, money on the couch. Let them niggas run in here, I bet nobody make it out. It's a reason I should doubt. Through the season, word of mouth. Got a stupid nigga smacked a couple whack without a doubt. Getting money on my route, low key. You know my style. Work what you need, I'm giving fixes to people. On tour my ego, stay away from the Eagles. Henny got me bolded, taking shots like they free throws. Flop like an eagle, load my talents an eagle. I want my quarterback, so I'm chasing range like an eagle. So here we go, let me talk to the people. Life is like a movie, meaning death is the sequel. Shooting like the Regal, theaters to help you breathe through the future of our people. Hope Elijah can see through. You better open eyes before that martial law rise. At your front door, now AKs to your eyes. Really you a guard snake, trying to play the Cobra tie. Riding when the grass is so you see the black mamba eyes. Body bags everywhere, the hood is in the drought. Trying to see you get in there so we can take them niggas out. Bricks in the book bag, money on the couch. Let them niggas run in here, I bet nobody make it out. Swat.
When I'm in the club, G, though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
I play the club scene, burning down gasoline. Couple liquor, taking shots of cold magazine. Money ain't a thing, I got a lot of that. Pour your queen a drink, now she wanna chat. Hopping in my lap, trying to shoot a shot. Claim she wanna get low and turn it up a notch. Got me touching on the box like a pap smear. Haters looking at me mad, practically in tears. Lord, we in here, no doubt about it. I'm in my own world, but the club crowded. Feet picked up, flirting with the barmaid. She took my secret tip and told me that her bills paid. Send the DJ a list of my favorite songs. Heat gas, got him sipping Dom Perignon. Keep calm, smell the loot on the premises. On point, off safety for my nemesis.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
Yo, my shooter move like Sean back in 01. Ain't nobody stopping us from having fun. By the bar, that's regular, we made it, law. Slick flip, Mr. T, yo, my neck's off. Get my flex on, bodybuilding competition. From the Southboard, I put the brick in Brick City. Dark shades on, living in the spotlight. They on their day jobs, talking about my nightlife. We not the same type, one night your main squeeze. Pimp like Pimp C, but living like a bum B. Club scene, a crime scene, if anything pop off. Soldiers at attention, ready like roll call. Last call for alcohol, law gets served first. I got your favorite stripper, glad that she came to work. All this thirst got me handing out Gatorade. Crystal for the chase, I call it lemonade.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with
So it was nice to meet you. Charging 2 bands for a feature, and now the price going up. Whole style level up. Niggas ain't fuck with us. But the D rolling up. Now this is the double. And the beat bumping some gun up. Rocking out heavy metal. Mom just loading the gun up. Niggas wish that they was us. AMG super speed. Yeah, different from the D's. Niggas can't fuck with me. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid and son. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch, get from me. Tell a bitch I don't need her. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid and son. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch, get from me. Tell a bitch I don't need her. Always been the designer. Back in the day with the Prada. Now I'm just rocking Da Vinci. The off I did trippy is in me. Now I'm just rocking the fly shit. Think easy finding, so stop it. You know that if I come out, I got it. You know if I come out, I got it. 10K in my pocket, if I like it, I cop it. Super speed in the car, AMG full of broads. I don't need none of y'all. Clip you off, drop you off. Bitch telling me to lead up. Stupid bitch, I don't need ya. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid or something. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch, get from me. Tell a bitch, I don't need her. Bitch telling me to eat her. Bitch, you crazy and stupid or something. Hit it once, I'ma leave her. Spin a band on my sneaker. Spin a band on my sneakers. Spend 12 on the marriage. Tell a bitch, get from me. Tell a bitch, I don't need her.
He just started testing, but we hauled them all. Now they praying for a blessing like an altar call. The way we stay investing, we done bought them all. Our section steady flexing, we be off the wall.
I'ma make the kitty pop and the titty flop. Me go silly with the rock with a steady bop. Eco-friendly with the guap, get the 50 up. I throw a party at my spot, I don't need a yacht. Bring it to a city cop with a semi-glock. I'ma take it to the top, moving up a notch. Wanna walk inside my sock, better tell you not. Because I guarantee we not the same sneaker box. He's a grown off aside, my corpus collage. He's telling me to reconcile with a good God. Keep my followers in line like it's Vietnam. Ain't no telling anytime, it can be the bomb. Open up and let me slide right into your mind. That's the governmental crime, I'ma leave it blind. Can't speak for all, saying we off the wall. I go to ooh when y'all in due time.
Excited to drop the flow when the beat drops. I go get on the stage, I grab the mic and set the show off. Put your hands in the air, get prepared, I'm about to flame on. Put up the gloves and ring the bell, I spray the bang on. Go ahead, clap for a queen, feeling kinda popular, living the dream. Pop in the game like a dress for the scene, cause I'm owning this name, homegrown in the jeans. Slow up the flow, pause, let me breathe, said the movement, ask my team. Gotta go hard, Wu-Tang cause the cream can't be compared. I'm a new type of breed, dope. Say my name 3 times, you should prepare for the smoke. I put the beat in a choke hold, I'm not letting go, cause I want it, pull up, turn up, pull, what's good?
Women DMing and be on tilt. Do your body good, it be like milk. Grass up on the wall, it's beyond built. Keep it 100, we be like Will. Plaques up on the wall, it be on tilt. Stacks up on the wall, it be on stilts. I dress it like yeah, it's all killed. You get it like yeah, cause y'all killed this. Really just off the wall, 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 off the wall.
Haters try to test me, so I shot them all. Now they in the underworld like a Pokeball. Show no mercy, had them pussy cats against the wall. Crack backs like backpacks, I'm going off on y'all. Going for a minute, I'm back in this. JFK rap activist. Make sure you tag me if you capture this. Gangs, watch how I master this. Now you know who the master is. Leave both in your mattresses. Flexing with my team is hazardous. Why you suckers really wanna clash with us? Cause this headshot like the slingshot. Shots the slingshot. Suckers backing down, but we not. Watch this French flow spit out like Tide Pods in my mouth. JFK in Jersey in the house, and we wildin' out.
Ride around in my city. Pockets like the guy Hickeys. Got a Glock tucked in my swishy. Tell a bitch drop and give me 50. And go wop wop. They come and get me. Throw a shot back just like a frisbee. Rock a top hat like I'm Biggie. I advise you niggas don't diss me. And my side chick, she so frisky. Yeah, I know it's so risky. See notes around, it's so crispy. You come back around like 360. I'm short, black, and I'm chubby. And my hammer pants, you can't touch me. Got a bad hoe to handcuff me. Keep a knife like Crocodile Dundee.
I can buy my love or loyalty, my soul is overpriced. Life be like B, roll the dice when you bet on the shooter, you know he shots. Keep saying he blaming, but only me mugging and spamming your Grammy about that emoji life. But get him in person, I better reverse of that negative person's a poltergeist. Body coated in a winter soldier with no coat when he been in the trench. Like a mama busted open for the coach and then her son is still sitting the bench. That's dry bones and the level that I'm on. You can't track with an iPhone, not a rock star. I'm a fly drone, a loud walk bar, leave your mind blown. Bouncing off the water, spot to be jumping no sky zone. This man boasts Thanos rapping, universe is snapping to the infinity time stone. Not to consume a doom and gloom, your crew buffoons, your goony goons are Looney Tunes. Boom boom and spoon and fruity loons, your fancy pants, your mans be pansy bloom and June. So many bloody moves on Zoom, burn on a few, jumping into the booze, other dudes with another excuse, hitting people up with the news, got a couple of views, bumping the bruise, I refuse, I got something to prove, so I'm gonna use and abuse, and the drama ensues, out of the odds of the ooze, shoes that I'm not gonna lose, rocking, I gotta pop it, and hopping and flagging the pew, dropping the clues, files around, but we wanted with you. Haters started testing, but we hauled them all. Now they praying for a blessing like an altar call. The way we stay investing, we done bought them all. Our section steady flexing, we be off the wall. Women DMing and be on
on tilt. Do your body good, it be like milk. Rats up on the wall, it's beyond built. Keep it 100, we be like Will. Plaques up on the wall, it be on tilt. Stacks up on the wall, it be on stills. Address it like, yeah, it's all killed. You get it like, yeah, cause y'all killed this Philly just off the wall. 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 Off the wall.
Hey, all by myself, all by myself. You wanna watch me get this money? All by myself, all by myself. If you wanna see it in the flow, all by myself, all by myself, all by myself. And if I gotta let that thing flow, I do it by myself, all by myself, all by myself. Those bitches allowed. I'm concerned for my well-being. On my well-being, on the path to being a righteous human being in the eyes of the all-seeing. Man, that's good enough for me, damn. I see you on your thug, get money, MC shit, feel weed spit. Like you get on your lip, that's some ill shit. I can't read you like I'm illiterate, you young degenerate, claiming innocence on some grown man, riding for the clan with a master plan. That your master plan got you in the jam. Somebody snitching in the van. It was written, y'all with bump heads like rams flipping chickens in the kitchen, lost a half a mil on your head. It's been said, niggas want you dead. I remember asking you a goddamn thing. I made the underworld, I made. All by myself, all by myself. You wanna watch me get this money? All by myself, all by myself. If you wanna see it in the flow, all by myself, all by myself, all by myself. And if I gotta let that thing flow, I do it by myself, all by myself. Those bitches are loud. Can't run, can't hide. It's like all you see is eyes. Now you realize living this life you die. Now you wonder how the FBI showed up on the fly. They knew about the buy. Should've never trusted that guy in a suit and tie. He went for self. Guess it's about the wealth. That's why I let it blow by myself. God bless the ghost. Getting chased coast to coast by them pigs and blue ghosts. Radio miles from top. I like out your folks. This is no joke. The jobs kill, rob with the cash and the coke. Like Bobby, there's no hope when your niggas want you smoke. Them niggas want you broke, hold in their head as you float like a boat. Nigga better vote. Yo, it's going down, get out of town. Dope, can't move around, maneuver around. Catch you slipping hit with a round. I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing. I make the underworld, I made. All by myself, all by myself. You wanna watch me get this money? All by myself, all by myself. If you wanna see it in the flow, all by myself, all by myself, all by myself. And if I gotta let that thing flow, I do it by myself. You do dirt, back to dirt, back to the dirt, put them back to work. Whatever works, this life is hard to exit. So watch how you flexing, trigger happy with your weapon. Say tripping, why you tripping on your prepping? Like niggas really scared, busting shots in the head, like we really care. Fuck out of here. Real G's move in silence, like they got a license for preciseness. Coming for your ISIS, whatever fruit beat the prices. Sell them what your appetite is. I can show you what you did, have your life kid, to show you what your afterlife, bitch. By myself, one man, one tongue, one gun. By myself, one run, one done. Sing enough by myself. Keep watching, don't lose me. Remember niggas tried to shoot Tex, Glocks, and Uzi. Tried to execute me like a movie. They think it's a bitch, but it never split. I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing. I made the underworld, I made. All by myself, all by myself. You wanna watch me get this money? All by myself, all by myself. If you wanna see it in the flow, all by myself, all by myself.
No doubt. Power now, the power now. Yeah, the power now, the power now. Yeah. Yeah. can't trust a soul when you out there on the road. The season changed, but the world remains cold. Shot to the head, the Mom Dukes is a body blow. The facts of life like Nell Carter is scandal. Jewels never sold on the antique roadshow. Keep it in the family for years to come and the value grow. Minus wealth up to Annie, put it on extra glow. Not gonna turn it down, small fry, hell no. Respect the game is how you get it back for show. I'm a lyric icon, you be the average Joe. Trapped on the corner getting pennies and silvers for dough. Really in investments, big trips and bungalows. It's all part of the plan, it drops like dominoes. Niggas that be moving on to other shit, let them go. Graduated twice from the bullshit, professional. Graduated twice from the bullshit, professional. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, put 10 on it, put 10 on it. Hey yo, you either getting chicken or you broke, that's what it is. This shit been going on since niggas was little kids. So get your mind right at a young age. To own your beds, get all in live about some shit you never did. Ever had a pot to piss in still, that's how you live. Knock off chains and you the top nig. Me, I'm in the soup kitchen cooking, trying to earn a gig. Work for mine from off the corner so you can keep the gigs. Niggas wanted me for dead, had to stay positive. Talk about no success shit, that's sugar rich. Prissy poop, makeup bag dudes, you extra tricks. Me, I'm from the cloth at the round table, you make no sense. Won't get stuck fucking with her, that's some other shit. Get it on with the vocab, now watch me ice the wrist. But we can get into, watch me stack them grits. But we can get into, watch me stack them grits. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, nigga, this is flaming hot. Put 10 on it, nigga, you bout to lose your spot. Put 10 on it, put 10 on it, put 10 on it. Hey yo.
Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Yo, my nigga Kibo shooting like free throw, you already know though. Yo, deep in the street, stood on my 2 feet, gotta stick to the G-Go. Yo, but I play your card right for you, yeah, get jacked, no, this ain't no casino. Yo, I do what I do cause I'm mastery. I do what I do cause I'm mastery. Diamonds like water, they drowning, yeah. Nigga too clean like Downey, yeah. Bitch on my dog like Bounty, homie. Run that shit up, no count, yeah. Guns all in my couches. Nigga, you rare, you mousing. When I come in the club, I bring it in. When she come to my house, she take it in. My time gon' come be pays and shit. That's why I'm waiting so patiently. I don't want my hoe no basic shit. Yeah. I don't want my hoe no basic shit. Yeah. I'ma run that checker. We gon' run that checker. Yeah. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. In that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that solo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. I just hit a little bit, who stay run away? Gotta keep my grass cut for these motherfuckers snake. Don't be talking to these niggas, they be talking to the J. Smile in your face, but I know they gon' hate. When I flow with a star like a Ray. I just spoke to God the other day, yeah. Died with the 32, Tony with the 40, yeah. Got locked up, John died a boss. It don't really matter what the motherfucker cost. Nigga say something, hit his ass in the jaw. I fuck a baby mama, I hit her wrong. I'm a street nigga, y'all deep in the streets. Nigga say something, they don't want no beef. Trust $1, all about a dollar. Grew on killers, I hang with robbers. All my niggas, I fuck with shadows, yeah. Deep in the street, no bossing. Talk like you bought a weed cocking back. Spin the bin, yeah, again and again. Spin the bin, yeah, we bustin' now. Nigga say something about trust porn. Callin' Doc, got 100 shots. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that solo, my nigga gon' slide. In front that side, we don't fuck with them guys. Up in that pop, put that right to your eye. Yo. Trust $1, wrong money, wrong money, wrong money.
With you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you, I go, yeah. Martina, call her my Aquafina. I wish I didn't need her. Now baby like my ether, hot cold like last year. Baby, pull up. Where the fuck was you at last year? With you, I go, yeah. Now you chasing. I was waiting. Wasn't fucking with me, dingo. You so faking. Now I'm like beep. Who got the keys to the Jeep? All I ever wanted was your time, girl. Counting down the moments till you're mine, girl. Now I'm like beep. That's all rolling out in the Jeep. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you, I go, yeah. With you, I go, yeah. With you, I go, yeah. Leave it, believe it, baby, so Benita. I wasn't stressed about it, now she got me like fever. I'm lost in a matrix, give me pills. She Neo in the matrix, the way that shorty kills. Now I'm raping, no more racing. Looking at you in the rear view, then my heart is breaking. Now I'm like beep. Who got the keys to the Jeep? Girl, you got me caught up and I'm sick for you. One thing will make me better is that love from you. Now I'm like beep. Me and baby rolling in the Jeep, yeah. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you, I go, yeah. With you, I go, yeah. With you, I go, yeah.
It's the artist. Yeah, Underworld. If you don't know what it's hitting for, I'm finna show you right now. Pull up. I told niggas about trying me, nigga. Huh? Tell a nigga pull up. So somebody tell a nigga pull up. Please. Tell a nigga pull up. You're not a friend to me. Real niggas know who's down and who the enemy. Tell a nigga pull up. And you'll remember me trying to put on the front for what you pretend to be. Tell a nigga pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. I'm switching, I'm swerving, I'm driving in the fast lane. Kid, the way I'm coming off, I'm showing off. I'm not the same kid, but you know me. Still slide where your grams live, not with the small talk. I reload and then I blame shit. Know nothing of what you claim. My niggas don't only bang, my niggas that twist their fingers cause they a part of the game. But the fam, KKK, shit won't be the same. Most styles turn shit to mayhem. It's spices that bring you pain. Can't smash this TNT. If I blow, I take out 4 blocks. And if you want war, let me know, I'm at your doorknob. And if I don't get you, them goons that come and get you. Got butchers that's nice with blades, sharpshooters that's sharp with pistols, Jamaicans that hold machetes. They use that to come and get you. Take your shit like a man. If you running, that's an issue. I'm digging to put you under the world. Nigga, I'm digging to put you under the world, and that's official. Tell a nigga, pull up. You're not a friend to me. Real niggas know who down and who the enemy. Tell a nigga, pull up. And you'll remember me trying to put on the front for what you pretend to be. Tell a nigga, pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga, pull up. So if you send for me, they better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga, pull up.
Underworld Radio, you live, you got on the air. Hey, what's up, Ma? How you been?
You good looking ass nigga.
You crazy, man. You wild.
Stop open up. I get caught all kind of shit with my goddamn ass. Bad boy style. I do. That's what
I know you do, yo.
What do you do though besides go
Come on,
around?
Pocahontas, you know what I do. Stop playing, come on, you're tripping out every time, yeah.
I can dig it. I can motherfucking meet dickhead.
Oh, you trip. Much love to Pocahontas for chilling with us. Let's go.
Underworld.